Welcome back, everybody. This is Dan's Racing and Simulations. Thanks so much for joining in with me today. I want to start a new series on the channel that I think may be very helpful for those of you who are brand new to sim racing. Now, before we get going with this, I want to mention that for those of you who've been sim racing for a while, this may seem very rudimentary and very simple for you, and that probably is going to be the case, so you guys don't have to watch this if you've been sim racing for some time. This is really going to be geared towards the brand new sim racers. And there are certain things that we do now that we've been sim racing for a long time that are very simple tasks that we do without even thinking about, that if you remember back were very daunting, like adjusting setups, car setups, suspension setups, fuel loads, things like that. So this is really going to be geared towards the brand new sim racers that absolutely just have no clue what they're doing. I would like to try to give them some pretty simple help. So this is going to be a series I'm going to do. And again, there's not going to be really any rhyme or reason to what I do or the order that I do them. Just when something comes up that I think may help people out, I'm going to go ahead and make a video on it. And this is going to be the very first one. Okay, so again, we're going to be doing beginner tips here. And today's video is going to be about calculating accurate fuel loads. So when you're new to sim racing, what most people do is they hop into a race and they run with the default setup on a car. And that's okay. The default setups are not terrible. They're not great, but if you don't know how to tune a setup, you're better off using the default setup than really destroying it and making a setup that's worse if you don't know what you're doing. But there is one major exception to that, and that is the fuel load, because 99% of the default setups in cars on every sim racing game that I can think of, there is excessive amounts of fuel in the car. You're carrying way too much weight, and you need to do something about that before you hop into the race. So I'm going to kind of try to simplify this for you guys, for those of you who may be wanting to know how to calculate fuel load. Now, what I'm going to be talking about today is something that I have been using for a very long time. I actually saw it on a forum years ago, and it has worked so well that I have stuck to it for since day one, and I've never moved off from this method. And it's going to be called the 15% rule. That's what it's called. It's called the 15% rule. And it's basically a calculation that you just plug numbers into to get your overall value to see what you need to run in the race. And for my experience, this has always left me with just a little bit of fuel left over, regardless of what race I'm in or what car I'm driving, because the calculation can be used on any type of car and track. So, without further ado, I'm going to explain it to you as simply as I can. The calculation for the 15% rule is going to be X multiplied by Y equals Z. That's a Z, not a 2. So X multiplied by Y equals Z plus Z multiplied by 15%, which is also 0.15. Okay? So what you need to do is you need to figure out these values. Some of these values are knowns. Okay? So X is going to be your length of race in time or laps. So in this case, we're going to say that it's laps. So X equals laps. And in this case, we're going to say we're going to run a race that's 10 laps, just to keep the numbers easy. So in our race, X equals the laps, which is going to equal 10 laps. That's pretty similar to what most races in sim racing, they start around 10 minutes or 10 laps. So this is a pretty common number. Also, we'll just keep the math simple. Y is a number that you're going to have to get, but it can be calculated pretty easily. Y is going to equal the fuel used per lap. Okay, so X is the laps you're going, Y is the number of fuel or the amount of fuel per lap. The way you find the amount of fuel per lap is pretty simple. Again, guys, I know this is a simple concept for those of you who have been racing for a long time, but this is going to be for beginners. So the amount of fuel per lap is going to be found by running laps. Take the car out on the track, do 4 laps, 5 laps, maybe even 10 laps, and find out the average that you're using per lap, and that's what Y is going to equal. So let's just say, for ease here, that we are using 1 gallon or 1 liter, whatever unit you use. I'm going to say gallon, I'm in the States. we're going to say that we use 1 gallon per lap, okay? So we've got now X and Y, okay? So we know we're going 10 laps. We know that we use 1 gallon per lap. So we've got 10 times 1, obviously, is 10. So Z equals 10. But then that's not it. Here's the catch. People can figure out fuel, okay? People can do averages, they can run laps, and they can figure out that it takes 1 gallon of fuel per lap or a half a gallon of fuel per lap, depending on what you're driving. But they never account for the excess fuel that you may need for wrecks, for off tracks, there's various things that can happen that will account for you using additional fuel. So if you just go by this first half of this, most of the time you're going to run out of fuel. So what you need to do is use the 15% rule. So now we have calculated Z, so we know what Z is. You always go from left to right. Obviously, this is simple math here, guys. Now we know Z is 10, okay? We're going to multiply that by 15%, again, the 15% rule, which is 0.15, okay? And that is going to be 1.5, okay? So what you get here, guys, is you get 10, which is what you definitely need, plus the additional 15%, 1.5, to make sure you don't run out of fuel, but it also ensures that it's not a huge amount of fuel that you're overweighing the car. And what you end up with here is simple math, is going to be 11.5 gallons total race. This works well. I have used this every time I've raced, whether it's a long endurance race or a 10-lap race, it doesn't matter. I always use the 15% rule, and it always gets me pretty daggone close to just about running out at the end of the race. So again here, guys, hopefully I didn't make this too confusing, but this is geared towards beginners here. This is how you're going to want to calculate fuel. It's a very good method. It's proven and it works well. So try this out, guys. If you need to write this down so you can use it next time you do a race, it's called the 15% rule. X multiplied by Y equals Z. Find your laps, which is X. Find your fuel, which is Y. And you just do the calculations. It's very, very simple. So hopefully that helped you out, guys. If you think of another one of these tips videos that you would like me to do, if you're new, let me know. I'll be glad to do any of these that I know how to explain to you. And that's going to be it for this one, guys. And again, it's the 15% rule. It works wonderful, and that's great for calculating fuel load. Thanks so much, guys, for joining in this video with me, and I will talk to you in the next video.